Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Outsider Podcast. I'm your host, Drew Landry. And in today's episode, I get into the issues here dealing with House Speaker Dade Phelan, and I get into one more topic about a story from the Texas Tribune that is about how Texas Democrats are now looking into flipping some seats based on the issue of education. And so, before we get into that, though, I want to talk about how you can subscribe to this podcast by going into Apple Podcasts, searching in for The Outsider, and click subscribe. You can also find me on Spotify, where you can search for The Outsider Podcast and find my beautiful smiling picture and hit subscribe to that as well. So, that said, let's get into what the two topics that I wanted to talk about with you today. One being about the House Speaker, the Texas House Speaker, and his resolve. Because the resolve of House Speaker Dade Phelan is something that we don't really spend a lot of time talking about. Mainly because the House Speaker is not exactly a well-known figure throughout the state. And in this past election, in this past primary, he has been a bit of a target, mainly for two people. Well, maybe more than that, maybe three or four. Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick, all right, Attorney General Ken Paxton, former President Donald Trump, and Ag Commissioner Sid Miller. Even GOP Chair Matt Rinaldi decided to get behind talking about House Speaker Phelan. And when we look at the past year that he's had a lot of battles with the Lieutenant Governor, not only in special sessions, but even with regular session. Like if we go back just a year ago, we're already in, starting or ending the first session, starting a second session, special sessions of the Texas legislature. Why? Because there was one big thing that was on the governor's emergency item list that didn't get done, and that was property taxes. You've heard this said before, okay? You've heard this said before that property taxes is a key issue for Republicans. Since they took over the legislature and they've had complete control of the trifecta of governing, meaning the governor's mansion, the Texas Senate, and the Texas House, they've wanted to do something with property taxes. It's been the big white whale, all right, as if they're Captain Ahab, and this is the big white whale that they're trying to really catch. And so even, property taxes has been a big issue for Lieutenant Governor Dan Patrick since he came into the Texas Senate. So this has been a big priority for this party, and they've never really been able to wrangle it. Now, in the 2019 session, what they were able to do was bring some reforms. Now, that was probably the most boring session that we've had in some time, and Texas legislative sessions are not usually boring, so this was the exception and not the rule. And so what you had there in the 86th session in 2019 was no special sessions, and you actually had a lot of funding for public education and property tax reform. Now, we have to use the word reform here and not relief, because there was not any relief, there was just reform. So that said, you had the state say that local governments, your counties and your city governments, could not tax above a certain percent. Okay, and if they did, they had to go to the people for it. All right, and so there was this talk of what would be dubbed as tax caps and what that would do, and there was exceptions to it. You can go back and look at the media that did press coverage on that. But that was largely a boring session. And now, dealing with property taxes, okay, going into the 2021 session, another big issue for that. But in 2023, they felt it was time to do property tax relief. And that didn't happen in the regular session because they couldn't agree on it. Now, there's lots of things to blame on that, primarily Governor Abbott, who doesn't like dealing with the legislature. That's a well-known fact. It's it's one of the worst kept secrets in Austin, is that the lieutenant governor doesn't like politicking with lawmakers. He has a variety of reasons for that. But because he could not show leadership, and because Lieutenant Governor Patrick and House Speaker Phelan don't see eye to eye, and folks, that's putting it mildly, we had ourselves not one, but two special sessions. And then finally they're able to come to some sort of an agreement at the end of the second special session, and then they were done. And then, let's also know this. There was the impeachment of Ken Paxton that was led by House Speaker Dade Phelan, all right? And so we had a small break in special sessions where the Senate went to a summer trial of this impeachment. It was rigged from the very beginning. There's no ands, ifs, or buts about that. But that left him, being Dade Phelan, a big enemy in Ken Paxton. So he has Lieutenant Governor Patrick mad at him because they don't get along in their leadership styles and their personalities. He's also got the Attorney General who doesn't like him all that much because of this impeachment process. Sid Miller has really never liked anybody who sometimes clashes with other people. And Matt Rinaldi, well, he's just trying to fit in, so he wants to be in with the cool crowd, and that's just really what he's doing. So all that to say this. The resolve of this guy, of Dade Phelan, going through the special sessions dealing with school vouchers, where he didn't always produce what the governor wanted, and they're just the votes for it just wasn't there at that time. But the fact that Lieutenant Governor Patrick and Sid Miller and A.G. Paxton and even former President Trump went after him and recruited a candidate, not really one, but two, to really force a runoff to help his main opponent, David Covey, to get to challenge him and to hopefully defeat Dade Phelan in the primary and later in the runoff. So let's understand what we're talking about here. Phelan has faced a tremendous test. All right, going with Patrick, who basically went after him to find a candidate. He's been going after him since these two became legislative buddies in the 2021 session. They don't get along. Patrick has little to no respect for Phelan, and we've seen this be documented throughout. That's really no big secret about this. But the fact that Phelan defeated Covey in the runoff and that he defended his home district against Trump, Paxton, and Patrick and these others is quite the big deal. Egg is on the face of Paxton and Patrick. And Quorum Report Scott Braddock wrote about this and saying how that's how the fact that Phelan is coming back and will probably become speaker again. Now, he didn't say that part. I am. Is just makes them to have big, tremendously large eggs on their faces for going after the Speaker of the House and the fact that they lost. So with Phelan winning and the fact that there's bitterness here, not just on Covey's part, because he ran a very tough campaign. He worked hard, sort of. He relied upon people who shouldn't be relied upon in elections. Paxton doesn't. He's not much of a draw. All right, Abbott is a draw, but Paxton is not. We've seen that happening where there were that happened over here in this part of the state. This happened in Lubbock, where Wade Cowan was the Paxton appointee to challenge Chair Dustin Burrows, and that just it didn't work. The Paxton touch is not Midas. He doesn't have the oomph and the gravitas like Abbott does in primary elections, and so that Covey relying upon the help of Paxton and Patrick just wasn't it was a it was a it was a hollow hope, truly. But that to be said, um, yeah, you lose and it sucks. Believe me, I know that. But the fact that Patrick was not conciliatory, did not congratulate Phelan on his victory, um, really made really really spoke volumes on this. Let's also understand that Patrick has been beating up verbally on Phelan for some time. I mean, he was at the Republican Party of Texas's convention in San Antonio, where he said, "I don't want to run the House, but I want a conservative Republican to be Speaker who will run the House." Which makes it seem like Phelan is not a conservative, which is the weirdest thing to really say. Like, are you kidding me? Like, this has been argued for some time that somehow Phelan is a secret, like he's some sort of a plant of the Democrats, and Democrats get what they want. This whole little mockumentary that this attention-seeking goofhead from the Texas Scorecard, who I'm not going to name, made this mockumentary called having to deal with do Democrats run the House. You can Google it, you can find it. I'm not going to give you the name of this silly mockumentary. All right, again, this is Spinal Tap is more accurate than what that person from the Texas Scorecard wanted to really bring out. Okay, let's just be clear about that. Democrats don't run the House. It's not a good question to ask. It's not even anything viable. It's absolute malarkey to even suggest that. Okay? They hardly get anything. They hardly get any bones thrown to them from the Republican majority. It's just the fact that they don't like that Speaker Phelan gives a chairship or two to Democrats. That's what they don't like. It's you're just looking at this going, what are you talking about? The last Democrat to be Speaker was Pete Laney, and he gave Republican chairships. So when this goofball who's I want to say conservative, but he's like on a whole other level, like uninformed, silly conservative. I think his name's Steve Toth. He's one of these people who wants to get attention on social media, loves to get a bunch of likes and reposts and all that stuff on X and all this malarkey. He's big on that. Like he wants the line. Like he wants to just really stick it to him, and get all his followers to repost it and like it. Like he gets that high. Like he's in it for instant gratification. He's not in it to legislate. He's in it for the name. But he made some particular outrageous post say, well, if Democrats ran the House, they wouldn't appoint Republicans to be chairs. That sort of post is like, tell me that you don't understand Texas history without telling me you don't understand Texas history. That's what that is. All right? I'm not even a native Texan, and I've lived here long enough to do enough research to see what X, Y, and Z can add up to. I mean, come on, dude. The internet can be your friend. But he doesn't want to do something like that. That's fine. He just wants the hits and all that. But let's also get back to square one here to say that the lieutenant governor's desire to oust Phelan is nothing new. He's been wanting to do this for some time. But now, he's got his hand into the House again, he being Patrick, where you have a majority of House members or even soon-to-be members signed off on this little missive, this little contract with Texas to say that we have a list of demands, and you can go find them. I don't need to really tell you how to find them. A Google search will help you, but understand that this sort of banning Democrats from being chairs was like from chairships in the House. Let's understand how that's a fringe idea, and it turned into a popular one among members. All right? So you want to ban Democrats from running a committee. Okay, fine. And there are also people running for House Speaker already who are making that their big thing. Okay. Fine. It's inside process. Average everyday people who may pay attention or not ever so often to the legislature have no idea about any of this stuff. All right. The average everyday voter is not concerned with how many chairs are Republicans and how many chairs are Democrats. I mean, they're not. Like, you really have to be, have very long binoculars to to really see this and to understand it. And there are many who do, but most Texans don't know who the House Speaker is, probably don't care, let alone about the issue of chairships. Okay, so we're talking about a small percentage of a small percentage of a small percentage. So that said, you want to challenge the House Speaker, do so at your own peril. All right? You want to get people to come at him. I mean, go ahead. You're doing it at your own here. All right. Lieutenant Governor Patrick can urge you to do this. Sid Miller can urge you to do this. Paxton may urge you to run for House Speaker. They may want you to do that sort of thing. But they don't have to face the consequences if you lose. They don't. Patrick has his own chamber. Paxton has his own set of issues. Miller, who knows what all he's doing, getting the Jesus shot up in Oklahoma and getting kicked out of restaurants throughout Texas. But they've got their own thing to do. So if they encourage little old House member to run for House Speaker, yeah, that's good for them. That's bad for you because you're going to feel the brunt of your failure. If you're going to pull off a coup d'etat, you have to do it. You have to win. Just ask Joe Strauss. That's how he was able to become House Speaker. All right? It was a great maneuver by a majority of the House to get rid of Speaker Craddock. It was. And so if these 40-some Republicans, who is a majority of Republicans in the Texas House, feel that they have enough clout to sway who will be the next House Speaker, well, that's fine. But they're forgetting about how everybody in the House gets to vote on it. Again, going back to Scott Braddock's piece, I mean, he makes the point that this turns Democrats to being the large voting bloc inside the House to elect the next House Speaker. So if your point is to ban them, then you just forgot about the other side who has a seat at the table in electing the House Speaker. This is just silliness. But, when you're the majority, you get to decide what you want to do, and, well, you get to reap the benefits, and in this particular instance, you get to face the consequences. This is not a good strategy. And I think that's why two of Lubbock's state representatives, Carl Tepper and Dustin Burrows, didn't sign that letter. I think that's one of the reasons. I think there's more than that. I don't talk to Burrows, and Tepper will sometimes call me back, but I say that just by conjecture, not by asking them why didn't they do it, just by assessment. That said, if these people who run for Speaker and lose, and those people who supported those people are on the outside looking in, they're not going to get a chairship. And they can jump up and down and cry about it, and that's just how the House works. So let's understand here that the point of all this is that Speaker Phelan, who defeated Patrick, who defeated Trump, who defeated Paxton, who defeated Miller and Rinaldi and Covey, all in the primary and in the runoff. Now he's got another election to deal with House Speaker. I think he's going to defeat him again. And if he does, that's going to send a very strong message to the House of Representatives that you don't screw with this dude. There's a fun little phrase that came around a few years ago, F around and find out. Well, Patrick and Paxton and Trump and Rinaldi and all these other people, they're going to find out. So if Phelan emerges as the speaker for a third term, which I'm fairly certain that he will. It's going to suck for those who signed that letter. Of course, if I was 5'4" like Briscoe Kane, life would be tough for me anyway. All right. That said, the resolve of Speaker Phelan is strong. Nothing in the world can take the place of persistence. Let that be known. That's the end of topic 1 here. But the other part I want to mention to you is something that I've mentioned to a lot of I'll tell it to anybody who will actually listen, is this ongoing conversation about who's the sleeping giant in Texas politics. Now, the long-standing thing about Democrats is that they constantly court the Hispanic vote in the state. The problem with that is that they don't have an 80-20 advantage with the Latino population. All right, and I've made this point before. I made it 2 years ago. Is that Democrats flipped in 2020. They flipped Hayes, Williamson counties, while Republicans flipped Zapata and Valverde counties. Big deals. They truly are. But Democrats also flipped Tarrant County in 2020. Did that? I want to say they did that in 2018. I may have to look at a map to remember that. But let's understand what the reasoning for that was. Those are suburb counties, and they won that because of the Hispanic vote in those counties. So statewide, Democrats already win the Latino Hispanic vote. They just don't win it at a very large margin to where it can overcome the state. So the problem with this is that it's all in the wash, okay? So the real sleeping giant in all of this is really teachers. And I heard someone say that teachers vote. No, they don't. By and large, teachers are pretty apathetic when it comes to politics. That's why there's advocacy groups like Texans for Public Education and Pastors for Texas Children. And then you have the Federation of Texas Teachers, and then you have the National Education Advocacy, the Texas State Teachers Association. You got all of these particular teacher groups, the Association for Professional Teachers, Classroom Teachers Association. You got all of these groups throughout the state who are wanting teachers to show up to vote and vote for their profession. And I've argued this extensively to the fact that this is how Texas Democrats can actually come back into the fold, is through this issue. Well, now Republicans have all but handed them this issue with the whole conversation over school vouchers. And Jasper Scherer from the Texas Tribune, his headline is that Democrats think they can flip Texas House seats by going after GOP's education funding and school voucher policies. Okay, cool. And they talk here about how they're going to go after some of the big gains that Republicans made in the GOP primary when they got rid of the more rural Republicans, or even the Republicans who were not necessarily in rural areas, but in more suburb areas, but who were against vouchers. Someone like Steve Allison. He lost his primary to Mark LaHood. And Mark LaHood is in favor of school vouchers, and so they think that's a seat that they can go after. They're also thinking they can go after Angie Chen Button. Folks, Angie Chen Button is a pretty good candidate. All right, Democrats have been eyeing her seat since 2018. One of the best candidates that Democrats had in 2018 and in 2020 was Brandy Chambers. And that was a very, very, very close race. But Angie Chen Button emerged victorious in a very small margin. Doesn't matter how much you win, just as long as you win. And so they think that because of Angie Chen Button's possible support for school vouchers, that could possibly make her vulnerable to someone who is going after her on the Democratic side. I want to say, her name is Avery Bishop, who's going after Button, who's from Richardson. Bishop is going to use her experience as a substitute teacher. Say, okay, I know firsthand about failed policies of education and Buttons, and that's going to be the strategy here, and maybe that'll work, But Trey Martinez Fisher, who's leading the House Democrats, who's the leader of the caucus, is making it clear that vouchers will happen if Democrats don't pick up these seats. And so, there's been a lot of analysis to say that perhaps Democrats could gain seats in this election. And that could possibly force Abbott to come out of his shell and spend money in Republican seats that he may not have wanted to spend to begin with. Abbott has already said that, hey, I've got the votes. Voucher programs is going to happen. It's a done deal. He's counted his chickens before they hatched. That's going to come back to bite him, and that's pretty surprising because Abbott's a pretty calculated politician. So for him to just say, we got it, either means that he thinks that it's already in the bag, and then he's confident in that, or he's got bad advice. He doesn't usually have bad advice, but there are people who are already saying, good luck. Try to disempower parents. Well, what you have to do to this conversation is say it doesn't empower parents, it empowers school administrators. And you have to educate the issue of this quote-unquote school choice conversation of school vouchers. It has nothing to do with parent choice. It has everything to do with schools allowing who gets to come into their schools. That's what this gets to do. And you have to hammer that thousands of times in an ad, 30 seconds, primetime TV. So Democrats think they're going to do this. Good. About time. All right? That's how you are going to win elections in this state. You finally found something that's going to put Republicans on the hot seat, especially in rural areas. And it's to their detriment that they couldn't find a candidate to really run against some of these rural Republicans to say, you're going to vote for vouchers. I'm not. Now, would they win in the rural areas? That's besides the point. It's staging the opposition. That's the point. It's to carry the water for Biden and for Colin Allred. That's the point. But what Republicans just want to talk about, though, is the fact that Democrats had a drag queen on their stage, and they say, well, that's what they want. Which, you have to, Republicans don't really like to connect dots. Democrats want to explain everything. Republicans are very good campaigners at just saying, here's A and B, and I'm just going to let you connect the dots. Democrats want to explain it all, and by the time they got to the third sentence, they've all, a voter has already just confused everything. So they have to simplify this. A vote for Republican A is a vote to defund your school. You gotta make that connection. You just have to you have to campaign like a Republican. You gotta take a page out of their book. That was the big thing in the 90s, was to say that if you were pro-choice, somehow you wanted every baby to be aborted. But to say that you're pro-life meant you wanted to secure the sanctity of life. Democrats got to find a way to use that sort of language here. I'm for your schools. I want your schools to be funded. I'm for your kids' education. So-and-so's not. That's how you do it. All right? So Scherer has several quotes here from lots of lawmakers and candidates on this issue. Okay, you have to keep on this though. This has to be a continual message, throughout this campaign, and it's going to take disciplined candidates for this to really happen. I don't think Democrats are going to get 76 seats, but I think they're going to have enough oomph in some of these more suburban areas to where they could possibly defeat a Markle Hood. I think Angie Chin Button's been on the hot seat for some time, and so we'll see what that's going to really come out and do, if she'll win that seat or not. We'll just have to wait and see. But she's a pro. I mean, she's had some very tough competition in the past, but we'll see how that's going to work out. There's other seats that they're looking at too, that Democrats are looking to really go after. But Scherer doesn't really mention those in the piece, so we'll have to find for our own and see what those competitive seats could possibly be. There's not going to be many. All right, the Texas House in 2021 in that map-making session really defended out a lot of their own incumbents. But people change, districts can change, people move in and out. We'll see what this election will really shake out to really be. But I think you might actually see Democrats make gain maybe 3 or 4 seats. And that's going to send some shockwaves to say that maybe we don't have the votes to pass school vouchers, and they have to hold on to that and make that a key point in their campaigning from now on. Make no mistake about it. Okay. That's all from me today. Appreciate you listening in. Again, you can find The Outsider on Apple Podcasts. You can find me on Spotify. Go find me. Hit that like, hit that subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon. Thank you.